See, mathematics, when you want to learn, you have to do mathematics. You cannot, listen and, understand or learn mathematics. You have to do mathematics yourselves. Mathematics is not information gathering. In fact, mathematics is information creating. That's the advantage of mathematics, because you don't have to gather too many informations and junk in your mind, which many branch of learning are information gathering. I mean, that's the style of, certain branch of learning. Whereas mathematics is not information gathering. Yes, some informations you need, but the amount of whatever information that you gather, put them into different combinations, and logically we deduce more and more information. That's mathematics. The basic information that you need is very minimal. The rest of them are created by us, but each one of you. So unless you do yourselves, you start thinking, you start analyzing, and producing new informations, you cannot say that you have learned mathematics. So I think that art of that's what a theorem or an exercise means. What you will not see problems in any other branch of learning. Why? Problems are new informations. Even if it is known to some other people, for you it's a new information. You are creating a new information by working out an exercise or a problem, which is unique to mathematics. How will you do that unless you yourselves, start practicing it? I think you should do this. When somebody gives exercises, you must make an attempt. Otherwise, what happens? You just get few theorems that, and probably you said you have understood whatever understood means. In mathematics, understanding is much more than that. But that's not enough unless you are equipped to create new information. You never can say that you have understood something. So you must make an attempt to do that. I mean, I'm not talking about this lecture series or anything. Generally, how you combine two informations and get a new information. That would be always your way of looking at it. I have seen that information. Here is another information put together. I can say that, yeah, this is also true. This is how mathematics is proceeded. Mathematics is studied, and you must learn that art. And okay, I'll get down to my presentation. Anybody wants to say something?
Sir.
Akhilesh?
Yes.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, your third exercise was, I'm a little confused about it. The third one was to show that two neighborhood systems are associated with given two metrics. One is the standard metric, and other is d of ab is equal to minimum of modulus a minus b. We have to show that two neighborhood systems are equivalent.
Right.
I have some difficulty in that.
Okay. So maybe I will address that. I have not written down the proof of that. But let us look at what it means. I don't have the presentation. Well, let me see my yesterday's presentation. Then I will get back to you, so that that will give you an idea of what the question was itself. So that itself we have to understand. It is not difficult. It is. Let me just get into my. I'm not presenting, right? Do you see my file?
No, sir.
Oh, no. I can. No, okay, I can see from my screen here. Okay, let me get to that. So let me get into that file. You have to wait for a while because I have to get into that file, which is much below the. Then I will present it. Yes, I have got it. So now I will I'll present now. Sorry for the delay. Present your entire screen. Yes. Share. Oh, sorry. Again, I went to a wrong. It has gone back to the original. Where is it? Let me check. This is the one. This is this the one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's just look at the distance DAB is minimum of it. It's a distance defined on R. Okay, the set X is R, and the distance is mod A minus B, minimum of mod A minus B, comma 1. What does it mean? So if you take two real numbers, look at the distance between them, mod A minus, modulus of A minus B. If that is less than or equal to 1, then DAB is mod A minus B. Because the minimum is going to be mod A minus B itself, because mod A minus B is less than or equal to 1. If mod A minus B is greater than 1, then the minimum is going to be 1. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now let us look at 0. What is the distance from 0 to 2? D02. What is D02?
1.
1. D03 is 1. D0 X is always 1 if X is mod X is greater than or equal to 1, right?
Yes, sir.
So if you want to look at open ball, because that is how we have to look at first. For the neighborhood system, we should first understand the open ball, then things be bigger than that. So if you take your radius to be bigger than 1, then the open ball will contain all the whole of real numbers. Suppose, what is the open ball of radius 2? Around 0. What will be that? Set of all points whose distance from 0 to set of all A, such that mod A, distance from A to 0 will be, D will be less than 2. But it is always less than or equal to 1, right?
Yes, sir.
Therefore, every point is in. So if your radius is greater than 1, then the open ball will be because every point is at a distance less than or equal to 1 to 0, and your radius is bigger than 1. Therefore, every point is at a distance less than the given radius. Therefore, every point is in the open ball of the given radius if the radius is greater than 1. Given radius is greater than 1. If it is less than or equal to 1, then what will happen? The distance DAB should be less than 1. That means DAB must be equal to modulus of A minus B. That's the ordinary distance in R. Therefore, the open ball will be A minus R, A plus R, ordinary open ball. Is this clear? Second part I said. What is the open ball of radius half at 0? All
Interval minus 1 by 2 to
yes,
1 by
because dx0 or d0x should be less than half. When will d0x less than half? So d0x is equal to minimum of modulus of x minus 0 comma 1. And if it is less than half, it can't be 1. So therefore it has to be mod A minus B. x minus 0. That means mod x must be less than half. So DAB is less than half, D0 x is less than half if and only if mod x minus 0 is less than half. This is not very special to half. Anything less than or equal to 1, what you get is ordinary open interval of diameter or radius r, and anything greater than 1, it is going to be the whole of r. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Now look at N1C equal to N2C. Look at N1C. What is N1C? N1C is, so it's in the previous one I'm taking. N1C is, here you can take D1 to be your modulus and D2 to be D. So N1C is open ball, subset that contains an open ball of D1 ball of radius less, D1 ball inside U. Okay? So that D1 ball, we don't know what is, D1 is treated as modulus. D1 ball, we don't know what is the radius, doesn't matter. Suppose the radius is some r. If r is less than 1, then it is the same as the D2 ball. Therefore, U contains a D2 ball. Hence, U belongs to N2. But if it is greater than 1, if the D1 ball is of radius greater than 1, then there is no problem. Take D2 ball of radius half. That will be certainly contained in, because if you take the radius half, which is certainly less than the radius, because the D1 ball is of radius. D1 ball, what is D1 ball around C? D1 ball of radius R around C, modulus. So C minus R, C plus R. Now, if R is greater than 1, you take S to be half. So C minus S, C. What is the D2 ball of radius half? C minus half, C plus half. That is contained in C minus R, C plus R, because R is greater than 1. You can draw a picture and realize that. Therefore, there is an open D2 ball. D2 ball is the D ball contained in U. So therefore, it is in N2. On the other hand, if your D1 ball is of radius less than or equal to, your R is less than or equal to 1, then C minus R, C plus R itself is a D ball. The ball in D distance. And therefore, that itself is enough. So there is a D ball contained in U. So it's an element of N2C. Converse is the same way. If a D ball, if it contained in D ball, say radius of D ball is R. Again, ask the question. If the D ball is of radius greater than 1, then the ball is the whole of R. So there is nothing. You can take any open ball. That what it says is that R itself is contained in U. So it's the whole of R. So there is no issue. Any open ball will be contained in that. So it is U itself is R. On the other hand, D ball of radius less than 1, then that D ball itself is the modulus, the D1 ball, and hence that is contained in it. So that's all. Go through it again, and unless you work out by just orally saying this, probably you won't get it completely. But I want you to work out and let me know. Is there anything more you want to ask now?
No, sir. Thank you.
No, but don't take it, because I said it. I'm sure many of you might not have fully understood what I said, because there is no picture or anything that to help you to understand. And I'm also not seeing you, neither you see me for any expressions that I put on my face. And of course, if you have drawn a picture, line and then looked at it, you may understand better. But I still don't believe that it is really enough. So you better go through it again, and then if you have any difficulty, please ask me tomorrow. Okay? And what about other problems? There were two other exercises I gave here earlier, which almost I have proved. One part I asked you to check. Because we started with metric, R, then Rn, then we realized everything you can cover with metric. So these are the ways you go general and general. So you don't have to say separately study R, separately study Rn, separately study other metric space. All can be studied together. And then we defined the concept of metric. What is that? Concept of limit point using metric. Saying every open ball around C should intersect A if C has to be a limit point of A. Then we came out of it and we said we can study limit for many metrics together if we generalize a little more. Instead of saying open balls, take subsets which are bigger than open ball, which is a natural extension. And then we realized that this will also cover so many metrics simultaneously. The study becomes simpler because instead of studying so many different metrics separately, we can unify all of them and study. But then when we do that, have we got what we wanted earlier? That you have to check. C is a limit point if and only if every neighborhood intersect. Every neighborhood of C is a limit point of A if and only if every neighborhood of A intersect, every neighborhood of C intersect A. That's what we should check. That part is one exercise, but the second part is that was day before yesterday, I think. Yesterday, we were talking about functions, limit preserving functions. We started saying that structure preserving maps are the associated objects. In fact, any structure you study, that is true. So in the case of analysis, the basic structure is associating limit points. And the functions that preserve preserve limit points is what the basic functions that you study, the maps, associated maps, relations. But then we realized we found a necessary condition for the function to the necessary condition the function should satisfy for it to preserve limits. So, and then we realize that this is nothing but the classical definition of continuity. So now we have to get back to say whether this is equivalent to limit preserving. That means a function is continuous at C. Will it be equivalent to saying that whenever C is a limit point of a subset A, Fc is a limit point of its image Fe? And this was the question I asked, exercise, and here is the exercise. I want someone to say whether they have worked out or anybody? I would have been very happy if somebody comes out with a proof, and you yourself can share from your screen and explain others. I would be too happy rather than me giving every time.
Sir.
Yeah, who is this?
Sir, Shifa.
Shifa, tell me.
Sir.
Yeah.
wrote it like, let the ball around f of c epsilon.
Wait. Now, when you answer, what is the statement you're proving? Let me know first. Make that so that everyone understands what are you talking. Yeah. What is the statement?
I want to prove f of c is a limit point of f of a.
Wait. What is your assumption?
F is continuous at c, and
So make it clearly. Yeah. So you assume that f is continuous at a. Now you want to show that whenever c is a limit point of a, so that's also an assumption. The first part is fixed. Second part also is assumption, but only thing here a varies. Try to understand. For any subset A, if C is a limit point of A, then FC is a limit point of FA. That's what you have to prove now. Is that clear?
yes, sir.
Okay, now tell me. No, only I want to set it properly. Whenever you answer question to somebody, you must learn how to put it very clearly. Tell the assumptions first, and so that everyone understands the notations you use, etc. Yeah, tell.
Okay. Now I want to prove f of c is a limit point of f of a.
Yeah.
So I took a neighborhood of f of c of radius epsilon.
See, the language neighborhood generally used as not for just that. It's a very general terminology. So what you wanted to say that you have taken an epsilon ball, right?
Yes, sir.
So use that term. That is better because we can use neighborhood for something else. No, yeah.
So
So
I
you
want
take yeah.
the ball of radius epsilon around f of c intersects with f of a.
Okay, let me see whether I have a picture of similar type with me. Yes, you have taken your A, FA, C, FC, fine. Okay, so you are good that I'm also writing the same notation. Yes, have you seen the picture?
Yes, sir.
So is this what you wanted? An epsilon ball around FC. Is that what you wanted?
Yes, sir.
Tell me now. Now what will you do?
Now since f is continuous at c, for
Yeah.
this epsilon greater than 0, we can
Yeah.
find delta greater than 0 such that f of the ball around c of radius delta will be contained in the ball of radius
This
epsilon.
epsilon. Fine. So let me go ahead. I think that this is what you wanted to say, right? Does this picture describe what you said?
Yes, sir.
There is a delta ball whose image is contained in the epsilon ball, right?
Yes, sir.
What do you do now?
Now since c is a limit point of a,
Yeah,
the ball around c of radius delta will intersect with a.
correct. So that means you can find an element of A in the ball, right?
Yes, sir. I took that element as x.
Yeah, so
Then-
I have written this. Whatever you said, I have written. Since F is continuous at C, there exists a delta positive such that the image of the delta ball is contained in the epsilon ball. Yeah, now you have got this point A in this intersection, right? Yeah, now then.
Now let x belong to the ball of BC delta.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have used A. Can you see that picture diagram? Hello?
Yes.
I used A. Can you use that word, letter A?
Okay, sir.
A in the intersection. So let me write that. Since C is the limit point of A, there exists an element A in because this intersection of C is a limit point of A, therefore every open ball around C will intersect A. Intersect A means the intersection is non-empty. Therefore, there exists an element of A in the intersection. Okay, now what will you do?
So f of a belongs to f of BC delta intersection f of a.
So in the same, blue region, f of a will be there. So f of a in that, so that you can write. So take the image, the last line. f of a will be in f of whatever on the right side, which is f of a intersection something, which is the same as f of a intersection f of that delta ball, but that's contained in. This is the rigorous way of writing. Okay, so that also you should learn. The pictures give the proof very clearly. This one picture is enough to understand the proof completely. You started with an arbitrary epsilon ball and use the continuity to get a delta ball whose image is contained in the epsilon ball. Since C is a limit point, the delta ball contains an element of A, and therefore its image is going to be in the image of the delta ball, which is contained in the epsilon ball. And therefore, the epsilon ball intersect F, the image, and namely Fa. That's the way you must always draw diagram and try to understand. I'm sure you must have done it. Others also should learn this. It's very, very, very simple, provided you're willing to put that much extra effort. You know, if this is just an understanding, but this is not a proof. But this will give you how to, actually get a rigorous proof. And the proof will go like this. So, I mean, the way of writing also you can see. We have not done anything very special. Whatever so first you started with something. From there, what you get, from what you know, this is how mathematics, you should write. And so FC is the limit point of FA. I leave this for a second for you to see. Anybody has any doubt or any comment anybody wants to make, please let me know. Otherwise, we will proceed. So if you assume F is continuous at C, then you can prove that for any subset A. See, here A is varying. C is fixed, function F is fixed, the point element C is also fixed, others are not. A is not fixed. For any subset A, if C is a limit point of A, then FC is a limit point of FA. That's what we have proved. No condition on A is assumed, nothing. A condition on C is there because F is continuous at C, so that C is fixed. F is also a given function, C is a given point, and others are all varying thing. Okay, so A is varying. Okay, so this is the second exercise. How many of you have done this? Anyway, Shifa, very, very nice. I mean, you see such discussions would help to, even those who are others, they will understand it much better when we discuss and do it like this. And I'm very happy. Yeah. Someone else should talk about this, the converse. Well, let me again present it. I think I just, yeah. So this is so converse. What is the converse? There we assumed F is continuous. And then we said that whenever C is a limit point of A, FC is a limit point of FA. Now for this part, it is exactly the other way. Whatever there we concluded becomes an assumption. We assume that whenever C is a limit point of A, FC is a limit point of FA. Now you have to show that F is continuous. This is slightly more involved, okay? So that shows that limit preserving and continuity are same, which is very, very fundamental in that, because analysis means structure in analysis is associating limits. That's the first thing that you should understand. And structure preserving maps are maps preserving limit points. So therefore, where is this continuity all on a sudden coming? Where is it motivated? Why that becomes your, natural map? That is because they are precisely the structure preserving maps. They are precisely the limit preserving maps. That you have to conclude. It's a very important, fact. So once that is concluded, we can switch over to more familiar, notion like continuity. See, mathematics always learned not very linearly, because we learn continuity without even ever talking about, limit point preserving, all those things. In fact, rarely people say what is, in analysis, what is the difference between algebraic and analytic, structures. This is this is the major difference. And so you should understand that part. Then you should ask structure preserving map, namely limit preserving or limit point preserving maps. And then only continuity actually comes, though we learn it in probably much before that. Yeah.
Sir,
Yeah. Who is this?
Akhilesh.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, I have done it using the contradiction method.
Why you do it in contradiction?
Because when I try to prove that taking any epsilon ball around f of c, I can't create a delta, particular delta around c.
Why?
Sorry, sir.
Why is it so? Why do you? I mean, why do you look at like this is very important? I'm not saying you're wrong. How do we justify? Because anybody would ask you, why are you saying contradiction method? What is contradiction method itself? That's very. Okay, now go ahead. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let us do it by contradiction. Okay.
So I have assumed that f is not continuous at c.
Okay.
So the definition says that definition of continuity says that there exists a epsilon greater than 0.
Yeah. So you are assuming that it is not continuous. Okay.
Yes. There exists a epsilon greater than 0 such that for every delta greater than 0, f of b of c delta doesn't contain in b of f of c epsilon.
It's not contained in. Yeah.
Yes. So I can find some x delta corresponding to each delta.
Okay.
That is in the delta ball, but it is not in the epsilon ball.
No. The image is not in there.
Yes, sir. The image of it it is not in the epsilon ball.
Yes.
So I have chosen those x deltas and c is a limit point of that set. I have called that D set. Okay.
Why D? What is D?
Those x deltas.
Okay. Fine.
So C is a limit point of D.
Okay.
But f of D has points, those f of x deltas, which are not in the epsilon ball.
Okay.
So I can't say that f of C is the limit point of f of D. So
is it that we can't say, or we can say that it is not? It is not.
We can say that it is not a limit point of f of D.
Okay.
So our assumption was wrong.
Okay. I think that's very good. I'm happy. So let me go through the proof again. Whatever Akhilesh said. The first argument that Akhilesh said is why the proof by contradiction. And this is a general, misconception among especially the beginners of mathematics. So you may also be having some confusion about it. See, no proof we try by contradiction at any stage. We always would like to prove anything directly. Only when we are not able to proceed, we suspect whether the conclusion is false. For instance, let us look at our situation. What is given? It is given that whenever C is a limit point of A, FC is a limit point of FA. This is given for any subset A. If C is a limit point of A, FC is a limit point of FA. And you have to show F is continuous. That means what are you supposed to show? Given any epsilon positive, you must produce a delta such that the image of the delta ball is epsilon ball. That's what is given on the screen. This is what we are supposed to prove. So we are supposed to produce a delta. Delta is of course a real number. But what is given? Epsilon is given. That's given. Otherwise, what is given? Whenever C is a limit point of A, FC will be a limit point of A. This information, neither it gives any subset A, nor it gives any positive real number or anything. If this already gives a positive real number, the data gives a positive real number, then manipulate that and you get delta possibly possible. I mean, sometimes possible. But the data does not give any hint how to construct a new real number. We have to construct delta, given this epsilon. So this is the time, then, how are you going to, where are you going to get this delta? Unless you can do it with whatever, assumptions you have, you can't proceed. You don't have anything else. But this information that whenever C is a limit point of A, FC is a limit point of A, doesn't give any hint how to construct this delta. And that is the time we say, what will happen if the result is false? And assume that, suppose the result is false and you get a contradiction to the assumption. That means if the result is false, the assumptions are false. But assumptions are already assumptions. It can't be false. It is true. And therefore, the result has to be true. This is what the proof by contradiction. So the reason to go for is basically you get stuck up. The data never allows you to, proceed any further. And in such case only you go into, a proof by contradiction. There is no place it says this should be proved by contradiction. There is no such thing. In fact, there is no one says a particular method you have to have a proof. You have to logically control. That's all. So as long as you can directly do it, always try that. Because I have seen many, beginners. Once a statement is given, you look at proof by contradiction. It is not like that. Proof by contradiction is forced on you because the data does not allow you to complete the proof. Only in such cases, your assumption does not allow you to complete the proof, then only you go by contradiction. In the sense, then only you suppose that the result is false and get contradiction. Therefore, we conclude. So this is very important fact. I just wanted to, ask this to Akhilesh, whether he knows why you go by proof by contradiction. Okay, so if this is not possible, the assumption does not help to do it. That's what I have written. We must produce a delta positive, but there is no hint how to construct a delta. If the delta itself says some real number exists so that something happens, then you can take that number and try to manipulate that real number and then try to get delta. But in this case, that's not there. No real number in your assumption, assumption. So there is no way you will be able to proceed. Therefore, we assume that the result may be false. So suppose assume that the conclusion is true, not true. That means it's not continuous. What does that mean? What we are saying is, for every epsilon positive, there exists a delta positive such that the delta ball is contained in image of the delta ball is contained in the epsilon ball. That is false. What does it mean? So the following statement is false. This is supposed to be the conclusion, and we say that is false. What does this statement say? Carefully, you should analyze this. For every epsilon property, positive, some property is true. That there is a property which is true for all epsilon. That is not true means what? There is at least one epsilon for which whatever is written in the bracket is false. That's what. There is an epsilon positive such that whatever is given in the bracket is not true. What is given in the bracket? This is false. What is given in the bracket? There exists a delta, whatever is that, whatever that property. For every epsilon, that property has to be true, but that some property is listed. That is not true means there is at least one epsilon for which the property written in the bracket is not true. So there is a epsilon positive such that whatever is given in the bracket is not true. So now let us look at what is meant by what is given in the bracket. There exists a delta positive satisfying some property, and that is not true. What does that mean? You cannot find any delta positive such that the property given, whatever is given later is true. That means if you take any positive delta, what is given in the bracket should be false, because there is no delta positive for which what is given in the bracket is true. That means take any delta positive, whatever is given in the bracket is false. So that is the next thing. That means, so now I rewrite it. There exists epsilon positive such that for any delta positive you choose, the property given in the bracket is false. This is not true. The delta ball is not contained in, the image of the delta ball is not contained in the epsilon ball. So now combine them. There exists epsilon positive such that for every delta positive, this set is not contained in the man's. There is an element here whose image is not in on the right side. A subset U is not contained in V means there is an element in U which is not in V. That is what written. There is an element of left side A in BC delta such that its image is not in that. So now let's look at whatever that we have done. I'm going through what Akhilesh said. So take this. So start with, there is a delta, there is an epsilon positive. So you start with an epsilon ball. So for this epsilon ball, if you take any delta positive and look at the delta ball on the left side, its image is shown here. It may intersect the epsilon ball, but not fully contained in that. Even for one delta ball, if it is contained in, then we are done. So when we say it is not true means any delta ball you take, its image will not be contained in the epsilon ball, the red ball on the right side. What does that mean? You can choose. So this is, we have said there is an A on the left side whose image is not in the epsilon ball. So here is an element of the delta ball. That means the distance between A and C is less than delta because it's in the delta ball. But if you look at FA is not in the epsilon ball means the distance between FA and FC will be greater than or equal to epsilon. So this is very important. Now, remember, for every positive delta, this is true. So you can take however small delta you take, you still have this problem. That there is an element in that whose image is not in the epsilon ball. So let me just remove that delta business. So for every delta you choose, unfortunately, I can't type A delta into the picture. So I could not, otherwise I would have written. Then, so for every epsilon positive, depending on, there is a, I mean, for every delta positive, depending on the delta, there is an A delta, because this varies with this A keeps varying with delta. When delta becomes very small, you will have to go very close to C, because the distance is less than delta, such that the image is not in the epsilon ball. So let us list. Say I have put so many dots. So these are the A deltas. As delta becomes smaller and smaller, it goes closer and closer and closer to C. But look at their images. They all fall outside this epsilon ball. Okay, so I can consolidate it. So let us, yes, this is this dotted, this blue dots. Let us call this A. Akhilesh used maybe B or C, I don't know, some notation. So I used A. A is the set of all. For each delta, we have one element of X, A delta. Choose all those A deltas, nothing else. That we have already chosen. Now we put them together into a set. So A is a subset of X. And what can you say? I have just plotted it, that subset of X. And now the only thing that you have to show that, and what about the image? Image is on this side. We'll see that later. First we show that C is a limit point of A. That's quite simple. How to show C is a limit point of A? Every open ball around C intersect A. Let's look at the first principle. Don't worry about neighborhood system here. So let us take an open ball around C, which means take the radius R. So look at open ball of radius R. By our choice, given any delta positive, we get a delta, A delta, which belongs to A and BC delta. So in particular for this given R, the corresponding AR belongs to this. Therefore, BCR intersect A. This is true for every R, because R is general. For every positive R, you get the respective AR. So therefore, C is a limit point of A. So that's the first observation. What about the right hand side? Look at this FA. All that we know is none of these points belong to the open ball of above the epsilon ball. That means all of them are at a distance more than epsilon from that. In any case, here is an epsilon ball that doesn't intersect FA, because every element in FA, images of elements of A, all of them have the property that they don't belong to the epsilon ball. So they are outside. Therefore, epsilon ball does not intersect FA. Therefore, FC is not a. Remember, if FC is a limit point of FA, then every open ball should intersect FA. But now we produce a ball, namely the same epsilon ball, that doesn't intersect FA. And therefore, FC is not a limit point. So what have we achieved? We have produced a subset A for which C is a limit point, but the image FC is not a limit point of the image FA. But then what was our assumption? Our assumption is that whenever C is a limit point of any set A, FC has to be a limit point of FA. So that contradicts our assumption. Why this contradiction happens? Because we assumed the contrary, that F is not continuous. So if F is not continuous, our assumption fails. And therefore, since our assumption cannot fail, that is our assumption. Therefore, our supposition that F is not continuous is false. Therefore, F has to be continuous at C. And this is one instance. I thought I get a chance to explain to you a proof by contradiction and the reason, and sometimes beautiful construction and bit of geometry in it. I thought I will explain this proof. I don't know how many of you have tried earlier. At least Akhilesh said he has tried, he has got the proof. And certainly he has given the proof. Others should also. Now I'll just write the proof, how to write it. So we have assumed that F is not continuous. So that those parts we have already written. So the construction of that, yes. So, and then Now, first prove that it's a limit point that I have done. Now, next is show that FC is not a limit point. How do you do? Take any R. I took R. If you don't want to use the same notation, you can use S here. No, this is already done. I've said, okay. But then you look at the last part. By the choice of A, FA intersection, B, FC epsilon is empty. Hence, FC is not a limit point of FA. This contradiction proves the result. This is a standard thing. Okay. So I think I quite a lot of time I spent on this. Now, this is where we stopped yesterday. And so this is okay. This exercise, okay, it's already there listed in my thing. We have had a look at it again. Please look at it again. So there is a beautiful thing here. Your modulus is, the modulus is an unbounded metric we call. What is meant by unbounded? Given any real number, I can tell you there are 2 points whose distance is bigger than that. In fact, you give me a real number, modulus of that is the distance from 0 to R. So the distance will be equal to at least that. Whereas this D is a bounded metric. What is meant by bounded? For any 2 real numbers, DAB will be less than or equal to 1. You can see the minimum will be always be less than or equal to both of them. So in particular, minimum will be less than or equal to 1. So there are, this bounded metric, unbounded metric, etc. Metric has, various types of restrictions, whereas limit points don't, need all that restricted things. So it's much general than that. So therefore, as long as, we can study limits, we don't have to too much worry about the distance part. So, okay. Now added to it, I want to make one more thing. This is very important from the topology point of view. It's like this. This is one of the motivations for, again, going into a more general kind of objects. Let us start with interval 0, 1. You can just draw a line. So this is the interval 0, 1. So we want to do you are all, at least the students, you are young people, so you will be thrilled to see its end result. You start with the interval 0, 1. So what we want is, we want to identify the 2 endpoints, identify 0 and 1. When my words are very vague, they are not all that mathematical to start with. We can very concretely we can formulate it, but then let us keep it at this level for the time being. So what does it mean? So let us start with, first let us bend it a little bit. So something like a wire, solid wire, metal wire of unit length, you bend a bit, bend a little more, bend a little more, bend a little more, bring the 2 endpoints. Now the 0 and 1 have come very close to each other. Now what you do? You identify these 0 and 1 now. The end result is nice because many of you youngsters are, aspiring for, alliances at the earliest, right? Very natural. And, the wedding ring is a very important thing. You go to the goldsmith and ask him, how does he produce a wedding ring? This is exactly the method. He takes a wire. Thickness depends on your pocket and your wish, and he bends the metal wire, and then finally he welds it using gold. And so that's exactly what I did. So still I did not mathematically define it, which I may not do it in this series, but you will learn when you learn topology what does this mean. But this is one of the things did in mathematics without ever having any meaning also. Just physically assume that this is done. That's the birth of topology in some sense. That's how the active birth of topology started. I mean, probably somebody else would do in a different way. Let us look at this. So the object we get is similar to circle. That's a very confusing thing. Why circle? Is this circle? That's because I did some particular way. Someone else would have done a different way. Take the line at 1/3 and 2/3, you just bend it upward first, then bend a little more. Now you get a triangle. Again, if you look at one thing, when you bend like this, the limit points of the earlier set doesn't get affected. Except, of course, the last bit when you do 0 and 1 when you identify. So you don't distinguish 0 and 1. Therefore, points that are very close to 0 are going to be very close to 1 also. Because they are the same point after identification. So otherwise, there is no difference. I mean, I give a second way of doing the same thing. I can give one more way of doing. You just bend the middle at half, make it a V kind of a shape. Again, bend on both these sides. See, look at that. Middle points again. So from this, take the middle points of these sides, these two. At the middle, you again bend it. You get a square kind of thing. Again, none of these bending will change the limit points. Except, of course, the last one, 0 equal to 1. There is a problem. Others, there is no issue. Now, the question is, of course, this looks like a circle or triangle or a square. This is what we would like to see. In what sense it is? So now a lot of things you'll have to make sense of this. In fact, that's exactly the reason, people started looking metric spaces in more and more general fashion, the way we are doing. And how to analyze, how to do analysis, how to determine limits, etc. How do we determine, etc. So this is one more very serious, interesting problem. I will give you a couple of examples more. Yes. How to find limit points of subsets in it. I mean, that's exactly what doing analysis means, determining limit points, if you can. I mean, that's the thing. Whether we can now, when you look at it, and then I'll give one more example. This I'm not going to, because I can't draw pictures here. I don't have a good mechanism to do it. Maybe internet you may get something. I have not done that. Look at the disk. This is in the Euclidean plane. Look at the open disk, closed disk, unit disk, set of all ordered pair xy such that x square plus y square is less than or equal to 1. The unit disk, that of course I should have drawn. That's the only thing I can do. Now what we do is, if you can imagine, look at this. Look at the boundary of this disk, which is a circle, unit circle. What you do? You identify all the points of the boundary into one point. Can you imagine that? Something like a rubber sheet, you bend it, a circular sheet, you bend it, and the whole boundary finally identified to a point. But then remember, no other point is identified. So you can blow it, and you will see something like a balloon. Of course, balloon, if you really stretch, if you can, then it will become a disc-like. Of course, you have to be careful while doing it. But then you blow it, the whole, that boundary, small circle on top, if you tie it, basically what you do is exactly that. So this gives you sphere. Again, the question, what does all these things mean? What is meant by identification? How do you now determine limit points? Okay. So I just leave it to you. One more example I think I have, but we like to say that it's a sphere, but we don't know in what sense it is. So one of the I'll get into it a little later. And then there is one more example. If you can think, this time I'm not going to tell what it is. Take two discs, unit disc. Both of them have the same boundary as circle, right? So what you do, each element or point in the circle of first disk identify with the same point in D2. So the two circles on the boundary are identified. So it will become one circle on the boundary. I will not tell you what object that and no other point is identified. So think of it. You may, be able to some kind of bending, etc. You can do, and you may get some nice object. And depending upon your imagination, you may visualize it in different ways. Okay, so this is, and all these last thing that I said needs more mathematical formulation. Believe me, without any of those rigorous formulation, this has entered into mathematics in the 19th century, and people have worked out many things without properly, framing it into a mathematical, formulation until the modern, definition of topology, came out. But mathematics was done. Lots of informations have been collected using these procedure without defining topology. Okay, so now let's tell you why I took this example. We would like to do this procedure. Procedure is take some objects, identify some things here and there. Sometimes there are two things. One is that take some objects, you can cut them into pieces. For instance, you take a sphere, you can cut them into triangles. Hemisphere, then hemisphere you cut into again quarter, then again, so it becomes something like triangles. They are all bent ones. You can do that. You can keep on cut them into pieces, nice pieces, and you can reassemble them. This reassembling is what we are talking about. Identifying along the boundary so that you get it. In fact, you must have seen football. A football is made up of so many pieces stitched on their boundaries. T-ball, I don't know, in my childhood it was T-shaped leather pieces that are being stitched along the boundary. There are various types of, there is a lot of mathematics in it, what kind of shapes you can use, what you cannot. A very beautiful piece of mathematics about making ball and so on. So therefore, why I want to say is that this procedure is so important for ordinary person that certainly, people would like to study them. So this identification business is started much before during the 19th century, much before the topology was born. Now, the problem here is there is no natural way to associate a metric. See, what you started with is a line or disk or triangles or whatever simple objects which you'd identify to get new objects. But once you identify, there is no natural way to extend metric to it. Two pieces are there. How do you decide the distance between them? There is no simple way. There is no natural way. There may be a method by which probably you can do in some cases even that is not very easy to understand. So this adds to one more dimension to what we are discussing. But what is one thing that I can tell you without proof, that there is a natural way to define limit points after this procedure, identified spaces. In fact, there is a natural way to define neighborhood system also after identification. So metric cannot help you to study beyond a certain point. Metric is not very much necessary to study limit points is what first we have seen. Now we are saying one more thing. Metric cannot even be, it's not even the right thing to do analysis. Metric fails to get extended to nice objects that you construct using metric spaces. Therefore, there is certainly a need to understand limit point concept in a more general setup. And that is what we have been trying to understand called topology. So before going further, whatever that we have done, let us just look at its advantages. Okay. So the neighborhood system that we had, first one, the neighborhood system helps us to avoid explicit computations in metric spaces. That's the first thing. We are still in metric spaces. We have not come out of it. We are only trying to understand how to study limits. One of the ways is metric spaces. But then if you use that, then there's a lot of computation involved. But neighborhood system, if you start using to decide to study that, then you can avoid this laborious computations. Number one. But that's not very big escape. We'll see that. Second thing is it unifies. Yes. What happens is we have already seen examples where so many different metrics will give same neighborhood system. So as metric spaces, you study them separately. For instance, the two metrics in the first one, another two later we have seen. There are plenty of such examples we can give. And in fact, let me make a mention. This is the time I should do. If you are going to, you will be learning. You must have learned, linear algebra. You must have seen vector spaces with norm, inner product, etc. So if you have a finite dimensional vector space in which any two norms you take, they are all going to give same neighborhood system. In other words, analysis is going to be same. It is independent of the norm. Let me mention very clearly, only on finite dimensional vector spaces. So that's a wonderful thing. So therefore, the norms are all different. There are, uncountably many ways of defining norms, but all of them give the same, limiting process. So they are not different as far as analysis is concerned. So that's why I said it unifies metric. So the neighborhood system language unifies. If you stick to metric, then uncountably many different metrics you will have to study differently. Whereas what we are saying is no need. All of them give the same, limit points. So second is unifies. What is the third one? Yes. Now the third one is the one that we last saw. There are certain constructions in mathematics. Just now we did some examples. Metric cannot be extended to that naturally. And therefore to study them, do analysis on them or determine limits, etc. on them, which looks very natural, cannot be done using metrics all the time. So these are all the problems that, the advantages of getting into neighborhood system. And so that tells us that you will have to go little more than that if you want to do analysis. Okay, so now, but there are issues. So that's the first thing I want to tell you. See, neighborhood system as the first difficulty is, of course, it is too general. That is why it happens. At different points, you have different neighborhood systems. And therefore, the collection is too huge. First and foremost, at each point itself, the collection is too huge. Because everything bigger than a neighborhood, an open ball is taken. It's too huge. And for different points, you have different. So keeping track with them is quite tedious. I mean, this is the first complication that you should understand. But at the same time, let me also tell you, historically, this is how it all started. So in the modern framework, we never look at it. But historically, this is exactly the way modern topology was born. But we don't stick to that. So anyway, that's just for a history part I'm telling. So the question is, can we make it a little better? At every point, you have to find different, system. Neighborhood system is quite tedious. Can we make some uniform choice? Uniform choice means what? We cannot lose neighborhoods. We should get neighborhoods, but not all neighborhoods we want to take, because everything bigger than an open ball becomes too big a neighborhood. So now we are going to restrict it. Let me make a general mention about, this is very common in mathematics. When you do mathematics, first you just make it general. Then you look at particular. Then you make it general in some other direction. Then you may look at particular. And then this is a very common practice in mathematics. That's how you study mathematics. So here is an example. We looked at it very generally to understand the advantages. But then there is a disadvantage that it is too general. So we want to restrict it without losing everything. So that means essential neighborhoods we will take, not all neighborhoods. Now, what is that essential neighborhood? This is, it's very difficult to tell what is essential neighborhood. Only uniform choices we take. That means neighborhoods that appear everywhere we will take. What is meant by everywhere? Everywhere means I take neighborhoods because different, at each point, different class we don't want. We want to uniformize it. So if I take a subset, then if you take a point in that, it should be a neighborhood of that. So it is not neighborhood of some point, but it should be a neighborhood of every point in it. That means this set will appear at the neighborhood system of each and every element of the set. Then only we take. But to realize that this is enough is a little involved thing. But we know that this works. Therefore, we are going to say that. So that means we take subsets that are neighborhoods of each and every point in it. So that's the so every element of the collection is bigger than an open ball. Okay, so what does that mean? You take subsets that are neighborhoods of each of its point means what? You take a subset U provided it is a neighborhood of each one of the points in that. So if X is a point in U, then U is the neighborhood of X. That means U is bigger than an open ball around X. So every point, for any point in U, there must be an open ball around it, which is fully contained in U. So that's what it is. And such subsets, strangely, they are called open sets. So a subset is called open if it is a neighborhood of each of its points, or if it contains an open ball around each of its points. So let's make a very rigorous definition of what it is. So what we are saying is, we are not taking all neighborhoods and we will take only this. Okay. So let X be a metric space, U be a subset of X. This definition you must have probably seen. We say that U is open in X if for every element of U, if U is a neighborhood of every element. So if you take any element of U, U is bigger than an open ball around that point U. So for every U in U, there is an open ball around U, small u, contained in that. That means there exists some real number positive, such that it's a more rigorous way of defining, but the concept should be clear to you. And why we came across this is clear to you. I think I it was too long for me to talk like this. I want people to react to what I've been discussing. Yes. If there is a doubt, if there is anything that anybody wants to, talk, I would be very happy to respond. Any comment from anybody? Or any doubt? Any question? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But I am not hearing anything from, because this time I spoke a little long.
Yeah.
In class I wouldn't have done it, but then yes, almost like a lecture than discussion. Anyway, first half I had some discussion, so I'm happy. Yes. Anybody wants to? Nobody wants to say anything. You're forcing me to again get into monologue. Okay, so I'll have to go through that. So there are now. Let us go ahead and see what. Yeah, this is just a pictorial, description of what I said. You take X, you take any subset. When do you say it's open? When you take any point in there must be an open ball in that. If you take another point, again there will be an open ball. So around every point, of course I can't draw that. So this is around every point there is an open ball. In fact, if you look at this set, it will be the union of all these open balls, because all these open balls are contained in the set, a blue colored set, all these open balls. And also every point in this, there is an open ball around it. So it's contained in the union. So every open ball in this collection is contained in the blue region. Therefore, the union is contained in. Similarly, every element in this blue region is contained in one of the open balls, and therefore it's contained in the union. Therefore, every open set is a union of open balls. One of the good exercises you can try. Yeah, first thing. Second thing is this. Every open ball is open. And that is the first exercise that I want to tell you. It's a very standard thing. Take an open ball and show that at every point, it is a neighborhood of each of its points. That means if you take any point in it, there is an open ball around it, fully contained in this. Only thing, the radius, you will have to, because the center is now different. And by our definition, it should be, suppose you take X in B, A, R, then you have to get an open ball around X with X as center. So the radius will change. So please work out. This is an exercise for you. Next. Yeah. It's more important an exercise, because every time you have to go back your foundation. What have you started with? Limit point concept. But for limit point concept, we said open balls are necessary. But now we are slowly coming out of open ball. Now in the intermediary step, we had neighborhood system. Now we are saying, no, we are not taking all neighborhoods. So you have to be careful. If you leave them, will you get the same thing? So now we take only open sets. What will happen? So here is an exercise. I think this is a very important exercise. C is a limit point of A if and only if any open set U containing C. This time you can say open neighborhood if you like, because open set containing C, since it is an open set and it contains C, there is an open C which is contained in that, because by the definition of openness. So U is a neighborhood of C. And in addition, by our definition, it is in some sense an open set by our own terminology. So you can call this open neighborhood. So now we say that C is a limit point of A if and only if every open neighborhood of C intersect A. So we don't need all neighborhoods. We need only open neighborhoods to catch limit points. They are equivalent. So by leaving a lot of neighborhoods that are not open, we have not lost anything. Even this smaller collection will catch the limit concept without fail. Nothing is lost. We get exactly the same set of limit points by just using open sets. So now what is the advantage? We started with metric. Then we got into open balls by slowly, reducing the strain of metric. But open balls are still very, very close to, determined by metric. So to avoid that, we went into neighborhoods. Again, we checked that limit point concept is unchanged, even if you work with with neighborhoods. Now we again that was too general, so we are again reducing it to only open neighborhoods. Now we say that limit point concept is still unaltered, even if you work with only open neighborhoods. So C is a limit point of A if and only if every open neighborhood of C intersect A. You can, orally you can say that. I've written it like this. So this exercise I want you to work out, because all the necessary definitions are there. What are the definitions required? Limit point, that you know what it is. Then open subset, you know what it is. Containing C is set theory. And intersection is non-empty is also set theory. So you know all the necessary definitions required to do this. So I want you to work out this. It's very important. And this is, this will lead us to the so-called topology. Okay, so we came out of metric and we got into without losing the basic concept of limit points. So let's see what is the next. I said yes, the second part, not only limit point concept, even the limit point preserving maps, we can completely work out. Nothing is lost. F from X to Y is continuous at C if for every open subset V containing FC, there is an open set U containing C such that FU is contained in V. So open ball, we have first we said, given any open ball around FC, there is an open ball around C whose image is contained in that. Then we said that given any neighborhood of FC, there is a neighborhood of C whose image is contained in that. That was generalized. Now, after particularizing, again we are saying there is no difference. In fact, I wrote if. It is in fact if and only if. It's necessary and sufficient condition. Given any open set, any open neighborhood, open set containing C. Given any open set containing FC, V containing FC, there is an open subset U containing C such that FU is contained in. So first open balls replaced by neighborhoods. Now that is replaced by open neighborhoods. So to determine limits, continuity, it is enough we work with open neighborhoods. And therefore, we are now going to get out of this and look at that. Okay, so now I think maybe I'm too ambitious to go again because it's already 8:26. So the definition of topology, I will do it tomorrow. So is there any doubt anybody wants to ask? Please. I want people to, work out, discuss here. It'll be nice. I mean, it's nice for you, of course. But you think it is nice only for you? No, it is nice for me also, because I enjoy what is that discussion than just monologue, talk. It's and that too, in this, at least if we are in a class, then I'm seeing you, at least I can see your expression and say, here I am talking to my computer. I don't see anything more boring than that. So therefore, I like people to interfere and ask questions. Okay. Any question from anybody? If you don't ask questions, then I have 3-4 minutes in which I can make a few more things to you, which is a natural kind of a thing, extension of what I said. Okay, so go to the next one. Now let us look at the collection of all open sets. These properties anyway you can verify. So that's what I want. So we have already seen, at least I have written, I'm leaving a few exercises, that open balls are open B set. So this collection tau that I have written, this is Greek letter tau. Okay, TAU is the spelling used for this tau. This collection contains all open balls. We have already, I have already written, which is very easy to prove. What other things? It's a collection of subsets. So if you, nothing beyond that, right now we worry. So once you have a collection of subsets, there are some natural things in mathematics we ask, because it's just a set and subset. X is a set and tau is a collection of subsets. Of course, they are open subsets, not all subsets. So what kinds of things that you use? All set theoretic properties you ask. The set theoretic, what are the set theoretic operations that you do? You can ask. If you take two elements, will the union be there? Will the intersection be there? Will the complement be there? Already open balls are there, so it's not empty. There are many elements. Then particular subsets you can ask if you like. So these are the questions that you ask naturally, because that's the way mathematics is done. So it's just a set theoretic questions, nothing else. So first one that you see is the whole space is there, because that's quite simple. To say X is open, take any point, there must be an open ball around it fully contained in X. Every open ball is fully contained in X. So you can take any ball around any point, it will be. So X is certainly open. At least we know that there are some open sets. Then next is the union. It's interesting that union of any collection, not only 2 or 3 or anything, any number of subsets you take, the union is going to be there, which is simple. You try that. And when it comes to intersection, that's not all that true. So intersection of any two elements is there. And finally, any language, when you set up, you have to be a little careful so that language becomes easy. So it is very easy. It's very nice. What should I say? It is helpful to assume that empty set is always open. This is just one set. You can do mathematics without that also. There's no issue. But then there are many places empty set will have to be treated separately. So it is understood that from experience, one realizes that it's better to add empty sets so that our statements, our proofs, etc. becomes easier and simpler. So that is why we always assume empty set is always open. And so the complements are not, which is easy to prove, even interval complements are not open. Even in R using metric, it's not. So therefore, that doesn't come. And intersection also, 2 I said, generally also is not true. So therefore, these are the best we can expect from this. So I want you to prove these so that tomorrow I can just skip that and go. Yeah, I think I stop here. It's already 8:30 plus.